Congratulations, you haven't quit just yet. We're on to part number 2 now of our track building series. So what we're going to do in this video is essentially building your height map, which is your track. It's what creates your jumps, your ruts, your bumps, everything. Now, there is numerous methods, numerous tools that you could use to create your height maps. I am a big fan of Photoshop. It's just what I am more experienced in. If you can't afford Photoshop or you don't want to pay for Photoshop, then you can use GIMP, which is a free alternative, which a lot of track builders use at the moment. If you are someone that maybe you want to visualize what you're doing more in a 3D sense rather than a 2D sense, then you can use programs like L3DT, Daylon Leveler. There's some very expensive 3D programs out there as well. I think you can use Blender for sculpting tracks too. It's really, really up to you. I don't have experience in anything else other than Photoshop. So that's what I'm going to be using for this video. Now, you will remember in the first video, I mentioned I was making an arena cross track. I've been doing it for all of them so far, and I've got a template already, a Supercross template down, which you can see right here in front of you. Now, if you would like access also to this here template, I'll leave it in a link for you down in the description. What it is MatRobs MX Simulator Supercross template that I have downloaded and used for MX bikes. So it includes like berms, it's got different types of whoops, it's got dragons back, it's got all sorts. I don't need everything that's on here, so you can see my version is a lot more simplified. There's just less stuff. I've just taken like one of the whoop sections out, etc. There's two versions of this right here. You have got 1025 by 1025, or you've got 2049 by 2049. They are identical. One is just higher quality than the other. Bear in mind, if you plan on building a very, very large track, then you might want to choose the lower quality one. If you're building something quite small, then go for higher quality. It doesn't make a difference at the end of the day. Once you have downloaded that and you've opened it up, I want you to do one thing for me, which is very, very important. I need you to go to image at the top left, and I need you to go to canvas size. These two numbers right here, for me, it's 1025 by 1025. They need to be a power of 2 plus 1. So what that means is it needs to be a value that is to the power of 2. So like 1024, 2048, 4096, 81, whatever it is for 8K. I don't know what the 8K measurement is. It needs to be that plus 1. So this is 1024 plus 1 to be 1025. 1024 plus 1, 1025. The reason is it's just what MX Bikes likes. Let's say that this was set to 1024 by 1024, and I done all my building and I saved it, and then I went into the track builder tool and I tried to upload it into here. It would throw up an error saying that it's not the right size. So it gives you an error. You just need to make sure that you are knowledgeable of that beforehand, so you don't build the whole thing and then have to change it at the very, very end. So now that we've got that set up, it doesn't have to be a square either. It can be 1025 by 2049 if you want a track that's wider than it is tall. There's many, many options there, but it needs to be a value to the power of 2 plus 1. And if you aren't sure what those values are, then just Google it. Google power of 2 numbers and it will pop up, and then you just need to add 1 to any of those. So let's try and actually build a track now. Because I'm building a replica track, I'm actually very fortunate that we have a track map for the UK arena cross tracks. Now, obviously, if you're building a track from your imagination, you can go in whichever direction you wish. For me, this is very, very easy. So I drop my track map in here, and then what I will do is I will turn the opacity down so it's still there, but then I can still also see the jump templates and stuff that I'm using. It's also worth me mentioning, just before I start, sorry, that if you're unfamiliar with what you're looking at here, this is essentially a top-down perspective of the track. So pretend this is your track. Anything that you see on the floor will be black on the screen. Anything way, way, way up in the sky will be white on the screen. And then anything in between that height will be varying levels of grey, from light grey through to dark grey. So if I zoom in here, over on the right, this here is a finish line. So we're riding up towards it. This is our up ramp. The whitest part here is the takeoff, and then this is the down ramp. The whitest part is the highest bit, and then you ramp down. And then same with the berms. So you kind of enter a corner here, ride around. That same with whoop sections. You enter the whoop section here, blitz across the whoops. It will be much easier to visualize it once we've made something and get it in game, and I can show you exactly what is what. To go about placing things, obviously you've downloaded a template now, I'm guessing, and you can do any of this. So let's say I'm just going to start making a track. So I will select my berm right here. I'll press Control Copy and Control Paste so that we still have the original if we ever need it. And then I'm just going to move this around. So let's say I want a berm to be here. We can paste it over there. If I want a single, I can copy and paste the single, and we can put the single over here. And we can just kind of start building our way through, building up an entire rhythm section. So we can have maybe a triple coming out the corner. Then maybe you want to have another jump after that. So it goes triple, and maybe you then want to step on to a tabletop. So we take our little tabletop texture, we copy it, we rotate it, put that in line. So from a top-down view right now, our rider is coming along the track, turning left around this berm. It's taking off on this jump. Maybe you're going to triple in, and then maybe you're hitting this jump and stepping onto this tabletop. And that's how you build. You move stuff around, you copy and paste it. And for me, what I would do is I would have my track map here. I would scale the track map down to fit the current sizing of my jumps because I know the size of these jumps works well for me. So let me actually do that. Actually, need to make it a bit bigger. So about there, and then I would move all of these to fit in line. Let's say that that's how the track map went. So I would work my way around this track now. I'd place a single, I'd place a tabletop, I'd place a single, I'd place a 90-degree corner, single, single, 90, a whoop section along here as well. And I'd do all that until the entire track was completely filled up. And then what happens is you get left with something that looks like, boom. So this is one that I made earlier, just like on TV. So I went through earlier, I placed all of this, and now you'll see it's slightly different from the track map in terms of layout. So if we look at this bottom rhythm section, so it goes berm, and then on the track map, it goes single, tabletop, single, 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 tabletop, single. I went on YouTube, had a look, and they actually changed it in real life. So instead of having tables in there, it is just 8 singles across the whole straight. I think they got a bunch of 3-footers and 1 5-footer. So I've adjusted it accordingly. So this is true to life. This is what the track layout was in real life. I've adjusted it to fit in real life. And you'll see that I've got some ruts in here as well. Before we go and put anything in game, I will show you how to build a rut quickly. So you want to create a new layer. You want your color to be completely white. You want to get your paintbrush out. And I would suggest using the hard round brush, 100% hardness, and a pixel size of about 7, because you'll see what happens in a second is we'll actually delete a little bit of it, so it'll be skinnier than you think. So let's say that we've already got a rut here. I'm just going to paint over top for now. Let's say that I need to build a rut in this corner. So how this rut would work is we would enter the rut in this direction, we would exit it in this direction, and what I want to do is I want to get my eraser out again, 100% hardness, turn the size down a bit, and I want to try and just shape it a little bit. I want 100% opacity. Just shape it into like more of a point at the beginning and the end, because you know, like ruts, they're fairly narrow at the beginning and then they kind of widen up halfway through. So you kind of shape it to your heart's desire. Let's say that you've built a rut that you really, really like, but it just doesn't quite fit in the shape that you want. So let's say I'm happy with that, but I want it to be maybe a little bit less harsh. I can go to transform and warp, and then you can move this route any which way you desire. You can move it around, you can tweak it, you can do all sorts with it. So let's say that I'm happy with that shape there. What we will do is you'll notice the color of it is pure white. So what that means is that rut will actually be the biggest thing on the entire track. It will be absolutely massive. So we need to make it a bit smaller. So we go over here, we're on our layer, we click the opacity over on the right hand side, and as I scroll down to make it smaller, you'll notice it's getting more and more grey until it'll eventually go all the way down to become invisible. We want it a little bit, so maybe if we put it on, let's say, opacity 4, so you can see it's there, but it's not like super, super bright. And then what we'll do is, right now, it'll be very harsh edges into the rut. So it'll just be that shape, but there'll be no bank to it. There'll be no curve to it. So if we go over to filter and you go to blur, Gaussian blur, you want to go about between 1.5 to 2 pixels. I'm going to go 1.5 for this because it looks like it's blurring that quite nicely. Then what you'll find will happen is, say you've done all this, you've made all the ruts that you like, you've moved your jumps around in an order that you find desirable, and you're happy with the final product. You will then save this and move it over into the Resolute Kraken track builder. So to do so, you want to save a copy. you want to make sure that you select a PNG as the file type because that is what the game recognizes. You then want to find your track folder that you should have created in the first video. So for me, it was UKAX round 3 at Aberdeen. And because I already have one in here because I made it earlier, I'm just going to overwrite this. You can call this whatever you like. It doesn't matter. You can call it Big Titties if you want to. It's completely up to you. So I'm just going to save and overwrite that. When it pops up with the format options, choose large file size and select interlacing. I find that if you select like smallest, then it compresses it in a weird way, and when it loads in game, it's all jagged. So large file size, interlacing, and press OK. So now moving back over into Resolute's track builder, we go up to the top right. It might just slightly be hidden behind my camera here, but there is a select button at the top right. Press that, find the height map that you just saved. So it's the PNG file. I called it Aberdeen HM. Press OK. And that has now put your height map into the track builder, but we're not done yet. There's a couple of things we need to do before we can actually load it into game. The map scale on the right hand side, which is below my head, so I am going to move my head now. The map scale over on the right hand side here is very, very important. This is something that you're going to have to do a little bit of trial and error with because how it works is it's got an X and a Z axis and then it's got a scale. The X is how far, I guess, long your track is. The Z is how far wide your track is. And the scale is how tall the highest point of your map will be. So mine currently is set to 250 by 250, which if I load up Photoshop, you see the black border around this entire thing. This is the whole track. So it'll be 250 long by 250 wide. And my height is set to 4 meters. So the very highest point of my map here, which is probably the takeoff of the finish line, I think that's the widest part, that will be about 4 meters high in like real life terms. If let's say you had a nationals track with a huge, huge hill on it, maybe that hill is 100 meters high, then that's when you'd have to change your scaling. For me, I'm aware that these are the numbers that work personally for me. If you are making something like nationals related, those numbers would vary. It's worth messing about and experimenting a little bit. Let's say that I kept this as 250, but then I set the second one to 500. What would happen is in game, it would be normal 250 along, but it would make the track very, very wide because it would stretch it out twice as wide as it is right now. I don't want that. My track is set in a square, you know, the measurement should be the same. So I do 250 by 250, and then it's more so the scale, the third number that you need to experiment with. If you've built your entire height map and you find that everything's way, way, way too peaky, try turning it down just a little bit. For me, you guys have played some of my Arena Cross tracks already. They all use a scaling of 4. If I done exactly the same track and I changed the scaling to, let's say, something ridiculous like 100, it would be the same size in length and width, but it would go up to the moon. It would be ridiculously tall. You wouldn't be able to ride it. It would be impossible. So we've decided on a map scale. There are 2 more steps that we need to do before we can load this into our game. We need to fill out a texture and we need to fill out a material. So we need to see what the ground looks like and we need to see what the ground is made of. Now, if you remember, back in the first video, I got you guys to download a MXB track example. We are going to need to extract this. So if you right click and extract all and you choose whatever folder it is that you need to be choosing, then you want to create a new folder called example track. So you create a folder called example track. Once you've extracted it, you'll have it all in here, all for you to use. And we don't need to do too much with this, but we're going to steal the textures from it, and I'll show you how. So you've extracted that, you've put it in your folders. If you go up to textures at the top left here, and you press add layer, it will pop up with this. Now, this is just where you select what textures you want to use. So I'm going to press select. I'm going to go to the example track that we just extracted, and I'm going to go to maps. Now in here is where all of Piboso's stock textures are. Now, you don't want to click on any of these yet that say _n at the end of it. That is for a later stage. That's for a completely different video. You can use dirt, you can use wet dirt, grass, gravel, mud, completely up to you. For the purpose of this tutorial, I will click on the dirt, I will press open, and it has crashed. And the great thing about Resolute's tool is that it auto-saves every 5 minutes, so it really doesn't matter. So dirt, open, and it will pop up saying the selected file is not in the textures folder you selected for this project. To use it, it must be moved. All you have to do is press OK, and it will move it for you. And just like that, you can see now this is now populated with that dirt texture. Just below this dirt texture, you will see a box here that says repetitions. This is how many times that dirt texture appears on your track. So if you imagine, just get me a wallet out, that dirt check texture is, let's say it's the size of this wallet, and I want it to fill up the entirety of my face camera that is your track. So that's one. What happens is it will expand this to fill up the whole thing. So you can imagine it would be stretched and it would lose a lot of detail. So what I do is I set my repetitions to 100 instead of 1. So on that track, it will repeat that wallet 100 different times so you can still see the details of the dirt. You can experiment with repetitions. Maybe you've got a really, really small track. You can turn it down to 50. If you have a huge track, it can be like 200, 300. On Resolute Kraken's Krakenberg, for example, the biggest map in the entire game, I think he's got it set to about 1,000 or something ridiculous like that. So I'm going to set it to 100 because I know that works for me. And then the final step that you need to do before you can get it into game is click on Materials at the top left here and Add Layer. And this is how you select what your ground is made of. Now, 99% of the tracks in the game are soft soil. That is the grippiest soil in the game. Soil is a little bit slipperier. That is what the track Canyon Rush is made out of. That a few people didn't like how slick that was. Compact soil is even slipperier than that. Sand, obviously, very, very slippery. It's sand. Maybe you're going a bit rogue. You're being a bit out there. You're making a supermoto track. Then you can choose asphalt or concrete. Completely up to you. For this, I will choose soft soil because that's what I've used on my other tracks. And then that is it. You'll see that some of these boxes over here are no longer grayed out because you've done everything you need to do to get your track in the game. What I would recommend is even though we've got a texture selected, the game's shading by default isn't particularly good. So it might be quite difficult for you to see where the jumps and corners are when you load in. So to make life easier for you, if you come along to the Lighting and Shadows tab at the top, and you change the second value down, which is called Light Direction Y, change it to about 2. I think it defaults somewhere around 10. It's how high the sun is up in the sky. So 2 would be right down close to the ground, so the sun will shine more on the side of the jumps, and 100 will be like way, way up in the sky. Imagine that you're taking a selfie and you've got the flash on right up close into your face. It will get rid of a lot of blemishes because it can't capture the detail. That's what the sun does when it's right above it and shining down. So I put it on 2, so the sun's lower, and I would also recommend at this stage to click Build with Shadows down here on the right. You might want to turn that off when it comes to like adding objects and stuff into the game because it can start taking a long time for it to build the track together. However, right now, Build with Shadows, and yeah, good to go. So we've done that. We've got our height map in. We've set our scale. We've selected a texture. We've selected a material, and we can now press the Build All button. Drum roll. Drum roll, please. And our track build is complete. So now, if we go into game, it should appear. So you will remember in video number 1, we selected the folder that our bike will be placed in when we build it. So for my video, or for my track, I said UKAX. This is my track folder here. Now, if I scroll down, our track has appeared. UKAX round 3 in Aberdeen. I spelled it wrong. That should be Aberdeen, not Aberdeen. I can change that later. We'll press start and it will load us into the track, hopefully with no issues. We cross our fingers and our toes and hopefully the game doesn't crash. And just like that, we are in. So if I go to free roam now and we have a little fly around, we should have our track that we made, which indeed we do, which is lovely stuff. So I'll show you this perspective. So if I fly above the map right here and look down from the top, you will see that what you see, so whoop section, berm, singles, perfectly correlates to what we built in Photoshop. So we've got whoop section, we've got berm, we've got singles, exactly the same. This is all my template, which you'll delete after the fact, so it's not still in the track. But you can see how they tie in perfectly what you put in Photoshop to what you put in game. Now, if I zoom down a little bit, you can see this inside right here is what I'd already pre-made and tested out, and I like how it rides. This right just to the right of it is the one that I very briefly made for you. So as you can see, it's a little bit too shallow, so maybe you could increase the opacity a little bit. You could get an eraser out and try and erase some of these edges here to make it more of a sharp transition, which is what I've done with this one right here. It looks a little bit jaggedy because it's on a 1025 height map rather than a 2049, but I promise it actually rides really, really well. So as we go around the track here, We've got our whoop section all built in. We've got our berm here. We've got a little triple triple. Got a double. What will be our finish line. Round to the left, we've got a triple double probably, or maybe even a quad there. That could be quite big. And this is the part where there ends up being a lot of back and forth. This is a huge trial and error bit. This is one of the bits that take the longest out of the whole track building process. It's make a few changes to the track, go and ride it. If you're happy with it, move on to the next section. If you're not happy with it, tweak it and try again. And it's a lot of back and forth doing that over and over again. I am happy with how this track rides. I will obviously go back and delete that extra rut that I made because it doesn't need to be there at all. But in terms of scaling, in terms of jump faces, jump landings, berms, I'm a happy man. I'm glad with how it's turned out. And yeah, this is the longest bit for you. And once you are done with this bit, you'll get to go on to the fun stuff, like actually making it look good. And then after that, you'll go into Blender and start doing all of the objects as well. To give you some help on troubleshooting, so let's say, for example, this single in front of you and this single, maybe they're too far apart for you. Maybe you don't like how it rides. All you would do is go back into Photoshop. You would select the second single here. You would press Control T, so you can then move it. And then using your arrow keys, you can just move left or right. And what that will do is just move that single left or right in game for you and get it to a point that you're happy with. If, for example, you think that this single here is too high or too low, you can adjust the opacity of the layer. So if I select that, it's currently set to 100%. So it's as high as it can go right now, unless if I duplicate the layer on top of itself, you see how it just got a lot brighter? I can kind of toggle that on and off. It's a lot brighter. That will double the height of it. We don't need a 6-foot high single going into a rhythm. So then you can just mess around with the opacity on the right-hand side. And if you wanted it just to be a little bit bigger, then you'd have one of the layers at 100, one layer's at maybe 10, 20%. So it would be 110 or 120% as big as it currently is. Alternatively, you can go the other way. If you want it to be shorter or smaller, you can just turn the opacity down. Maybe you want it to be half the size, so you'd put the opacity on 50%. And these are just those sorts of little micro changes that you make in the track building progress and the little tweaks that you want to make until you get something how you like it. One other thing that I find very handy sometimes is so this landing that you see right here. Notice how the landing is more dragged out. It's just like a more mellow transition. It's not quite as sharp as like this landing, for example. It's exactly the same jump. I've just manipulated it slightly. And how you do that is if you select one of these jumps, say you want to stretch the landing of this out, I would get my rectangle marquee tool up here to select it. And I would only select it up until halfway, like to the highest point of the jump. And then what happens if I press Control T, and then I hold Shift on my keyboard and then move it side to side, we can just drag the landing and only the landing out to make it a longer transition. You can make it shorter if you want. You can make it like the steepest transition on the planet. Those are just a few little helpful tips here and there for just adjusting and making those tiny little micro adjustments to your track. And yeah, that is probably takes the longest. So hours, days, not sometimes, depending on the size of the track. There's a lot of trial and error on that. If, for example, you're making really small adjustments and you don't want to keep loading the game all the time, what you would do is you would make your changes, come in here, select your height map, press build all again, and then you have what is called a map view down here on the right hand side, which is something that we installed in the first episode. You come over to file and open, and then if you go into your track folder location, and then there should be another folder with exactly the same name, you'll have your track folder .map. It's a map file. Click on that and it will load it up. So this is a way of viewing your track without having to close and reopen the game over and over and over again. To move around in map viewer, hold shift on your keyboard and then move your mouse. That will help you move around side to side. To move the camera forwards, left, right and back, it's WASD. And then to move faster, you use your scroll wheel. So if I scroll all the way up, I go like super speed. If I scroll all the way down and I start moving, it goes really slowly. So that's how you move around in map viewer. So this is a good way of seeing like those micro changes without having to keep loading the game. The only issue is you do want to do tests every now and then in game because I find the map viewer to not be great in terms of judging scaling. So a lot of jumps, they might look very easy and doable. When you go in game, you realize that actually the jumps are a lot bigger than you expected. So just bear that in mind. So now you should have your track. You should have a tracking game that is functioning. Make as many little tweaks and tests as you need to do at this point in the process. Don't skip ahead to other things. You need to make sure that you're 110% happy with your tracked height map before you move on, because the next step is the texturing side of things. Now, a lot of texturing ends up being highlighting berms or ruts or the tops of jumps so they're easy to see. Let's say you highlight a jump and then you realize you're not happy with it and you move the jump. That highlight will then be in the wrong place. So you have to go and redo the highlight as well. So I would 100% recommend getting all of your height map stuff done first, making sure the track rides with how you want it to ride before you start going and making things look pretty. So congratulations on making it this far. You should hopefully have a height map now. You'll probably spend the next couple of hours, days, weeks, months now tweaking it tiny little bits at a time and testing until you're satisfied with the outcome. And then after that, it's time to go on to the texturing. So well done on making it this far. I hope to see you in episode number 3, where you can start making it look pretty as well. And if you enjoyed, please do drop a like, subscribe channel if you're new, all that good stuff. And on to the next one.